In our world today, there are many conflicts. These range from a small talkative fight to large wars. The world's history has shaped the places that we live in today. Wars have been a major impact on our lives because it creates new opportunities that weren't available before. One of these wars that changed the face of history was the American Civil War. It occurred from 1861 to 1865. The battles occurred in the United States and the Confederate States. They have majorly impacted our society today. The Civil War had many causes. Major ones were slavery, states' rights, the election of Abraham Lincoln, and territory disputes.
Although slavery is the most noted factor of the Civil War, it is not the only significant aspect. It also had one of the biggest ending conclusions. Slavery was around long before the Civil War. It started becoming very common or well known in the Americas after Christopher Columbus discovered the New World. Slaves were throughout all of America at first, until the South states, Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, and Texas, seceded from the North in 1861. Later that year, the South creates their own government ran by Jefferson Davis. In April of 1861, the Civil War starts with the Battle of Fort Sumter, with Robert E. Lee leading the South. Slaves mainly were used to pick crops and for outdoor work. They were not treated with any form of human respect. Slaves were given one meal per day, usually at night. They slept in a small barn or stable, usually holding 20 to 30 slaves. They were not given any sheets or mattresses. They used hay as their bed and their sheets. One of slave owners' worst fears were smart slaves. They did not like smart slaves because if they could talk English or understand people, they could communicate with the outside world, which led to escaping. If a slave escaped and were caught, they would be whipped.
One aspect of the Civil War that is often misunderstood is the aspect of states' rights. Part of the reason for that involves the fact that many people don't truly understand what states' rights are. Even today, individual states have rights aside from the federal government. Around the time Abraham Lincoln was elected as president, the South was feeling as though the federal government was abusing its power and that the North was benefiting from it. The capital was in the North, thus giving the idea that the national or federal government favored the North. This involved their economy as well as the previously mentioned topic of slavery. Those in the South favored the traditional mindset of the Articles of Confederation, a loose linking of the states giving much independence and individualism to the states. In Article 2 of the Articles of Confederation, it states, "Each state retains its sovereignty, freedom, and independence in every power, jurisdiction, and right, which is not by this Confederation expressly delegated to the United States in Congress assembled." 10 years later, in 1787, the Constitution was written, supporting a more unified nation under the power of the crucial topic for many years, as over 70 years later after the Constitution was written. The South was still unhappy, feeling as though the federal government, located in the North, didn't have their best interests at heart. The South still felt slighted. A large reason for this is because two of the representatives who fought for states' rights were not present at the signing. This included Patrick Henry, as well as Thomas Jefferson. The South was finally set over the top with the election of Abraham Lincoln.
The election of Lincoln caused great concern in the South, for it was believed that Lincoln, more than any of the other candidates running in 1860, posed a threat to the constitution of slavery. No matter what Lincoln said to try and persuade Southerners that he did not want to abolish slavery, they didn't listen. With the election of Republican candidate Abraham Lincoln on November 6, 1860, South Carolina, followed by 6 other states, seceded from the Union. even though his views about slavery were considered moderate during the nomination and election of South Carolina, had warned it would succeed if he won. Lincoln agreed with the majority of the Republican Party that the South was becoming too powerful and made it part of their platform that slavery would not be extended to any new territories or states added to the Union. The United States presidential election of 1860 set the stage for the American Civil War. The nation had been divided throughout most of the 1850s on questions of states' rights and slavery in the territories. In 1860, this issue finally came to a head, fracturing the formerly dominant Democratic Party into Southern and Northern factions, and bringing Abraham Lincoln and the Republican Party to power without the support of a single Southern state.
As like in many wars, territory disputes are a major cause of the beginning of these fights. They are a big influence to the start of a conflict. In the American Civil War, territory disputes marked the start of the war. The South had different opinions about the states that would belong to each country after the Confederacy seceded. The Staunton Spectator newspaper in November 13, 1860 says, "Spectator regrets to inform its readers that the forces of sectionalism triumphed in the election of Lincoln's victory, but feels confident that the South can protect its own interests through the other branches of government which it still controls. It counsels against secession, which would place the South in unnecessary danger by effectively turning all power over to the Republicans." The Confederacy seceded with 7 states at first. The border states had to make an important decision. After April 1861, 4 more states were added to the Confederacy. The main states to accept the Confederacy views about the conflict were the Southern states. Because of their economy and lifestyles were based on slavery, cotton fields in the states make their own laws. The Southern states decided to secede. An hour before daylight, the horn is blown. Then the slaves arouse, prepare their breakfast, fill a gourd with water. In another deposit their dinner of cold bacon and corn cake, and hurry to the field again. Solomon Northrop. Because of the very different views from the Union and Confederacy, all the states have different opinions. Some states like Virginia, North and South Carolina split up and went to different sides. Others, like the border states, were forced to make a decision that caused their relationships with other states to fall apart. There were families that lived on different parts of the states that split up, and were forced to fight their own family members and friends on the other side of the battlefield. Maybe I have described our life here before, but as no one description can do it justice, I'm going to try again. We're in a field of 100 acres, as near as I can judge, on the side of a hill near the top. The ground is newly seeded and wets up quickly, just as ground usually does. Lawrence Van Alstyne. Territory disputes were a major factor of the start of the Civil War. Territory is one of the main causes of any war because of 2 sides having different opinions about who can have the most land.
The Civil War finally came to a close on April 9, 1865. This occurred after the surrender of the Confederacy. It could be said that for the Confederacy, everything had been in vain. Slavery had been banned, the federal government had overpowered the fight for states' rights, and Lincoln was still in office. However, if the South had not stood up for their beliefs and protected their way of life, our culture would be quite different today. Even with the horrors of death and broken families that came along with the Civil War, the outcome and the desires of the Southern states created the America that we live in today.